Every single time I see a post on Twitter talking extensively about like how good Breath of the Wild is, some kind of like obscure secret or animation or gameplay feature or mechanic or dungeon or area or just gorgeous open world. Every single time I see a motherfucker with no followers come out and say, "Oh, I didn't like Breath of the Wild." Every single time. And considering how, like, I don't really observe this behavior with basically any other major gaming IP, any other major game period, I'm inclined to say, considering like how often I see that hear the same lines be recycled and reused even years after being debunked, like I can safely say that I believe this is a coordinated chilling campaign. Like, someone out there, probably PlayStation, probably Sony, probably some major third-party developer, someone out there has a vested interest in trying to destabilize Breath of the Wild's status as the best open world game of the generation, if not of all time. I find it so bizarre how a game that's so unique, so innovative, so beloved could have so many contrarians come out and try to say that it's not very good, and then don't really offer an explanation as to what they think is better, because they know there's nothing better than it. Like, what? Are you gonna play San Andreas again? Are you gonna go gangbang again? Are you gonna go out and like watch horse testicles drop in Red Dead Redemption 2? Or like go through the endless plotting cutscenes of The Witcher 3? Like, it's remarkable how big of a gap in quality there is between Zelda and these other games that the industry is trying to say are just as good, if not better, than it. You know what I mean? Like, just looking at Red Dead Redemption 2 by itself is just... it's ridiculous. It really is insane just how much better Zelda is than this shit. And we're at the point now, I think, where people are sort of, people who grew up with PlayStation, people who grew up being told that Rockstar Games, that CD Projekt Red, that all these companies are somehow better than Nintendo. I mean, I actually think this is the big thing for me that really, really irritates me. Why is Nintendo not more widely considered the best gaming developer in the world? Because they develop things like Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, Super Metroid, Ocarina of Time, Super Mario 64. A lot of the games that anyone would tell you are the best ever made, and yet somehow they're not the best developer. Why? Like, what's your reasoning? I'll tell you, it's the reason. It's not on PlayStation. That's the only reason why Nintendo isn't being given the props it deserves. You know what I mean? Like, people are allowed to be nostalgic for Sega, of all companies, despite like a year's worth of more of a spotty track record than Nintendo. But somehow Nintendo is always the bad guy. Nintendo is always the enemy. Nintendo has failed to keep their audience, even though there are people of all age groups and demographics that love them and appreciate the games they put out all the time. It's fake, is what I'm saying at. Like, when I see people complaining about Breath of the Wild, it comes off as fake. It comes off as disingenuous. It comes off as a desperate attempt to downplay probably the biggest success of the generation. I legit don't think we're going to see another game this good for 20 years. Like, it's legit that mind-blowing. Like, we're going to be seeing games 5 years from now, 5-10 years from now, that aren't as impressive as this. Like, the industry simply can't keep up with what Nintendo is doing at all. Like, they can't adapt motion controls. They can't adapt, like, they can't do anything. You know what I mean? They haven't made a really good game, I don't think, ever. Like, I legit don't think so. Like, if you're like me and play Nintendo consoles, like, you really do you really do appreciate just how much better the Nintendo games are. You know what I mean? Like, the average Nintendo game is better than, like, the very best the other developers have to offer, and yet somehow, oh, Breath of the Wild is kind of overrated. Like, no, it isn't. No, it isn't. No, it is not. I'm not impressed with the narrative, the carefully constructed narrative, or rather, the attempt at a narrative. Because I do think this is an example of Breath of the Wild generally being so popular and so beloved that people, the industry, right, the shilling campaign, the YouTubers, the game journalists, PlayStation, right, they're having a very difficult time downplaying it. Like with Splatoon, they talked all this shit about like Overwatch and how Splatoon was less popular than it, and how it was on the Wii U, and how it wasn't a big deal. With ARMS, you had like the whole ARMS is dead situation. Like, that didn't quite work, but I think like people kind of bought into those narratives, right? They sort of believed them at face value. Not so with Zelda. I really don't think. I don't think people are really buying this narrative that Breath of the Wild is a bad or a disappointing game. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't mesh well with what people actually want from Nintendo and from their IPs. Like, Breath of the Wild was honestly one of the best reinvigorations of a classic IP I think Nintendo has ever done since the N64 era. It was that good, you know what I mean? I am extremely disappointed with anyone who would dare suggest that this game is not a masterpiece.